Editing a gamebook. The same rules that apply to all fiction editing apply here in a gamebook too. This is a skill, it's an art and has to be learned. If you haven't done any of the many free online fiction writing courses, then you should do yourself and your readers a favour and take a look at them. Here's an important hint. Before you start editing, put the text away for at least a week. Make a gap. Take a break. This will allow you to forget many of your assumptions and enable you to approach editing with a fresh mind. Don't waste your time during this week, however. Go gather artwork for the book or start a new book even. But whatever, take a break. You might be enthused and excited, but if you don't take a break, you won't be doing yourself any favours in the editing process. The notes that follow here are really only brushing the surface of good editing practices, but these are things that have worked for me. The most important, in my mind, is to cut useless words. In fact, not just words, but sometimes even whole sentences. To give you an extreme personal example, I banged out a short story with 15,000 words and was able to cut that back to 6,000 by the time editing was completed. So often, our education system puts emphasis on word count. You have to present an essay of 5,000 words so that you start structuring your text to give maximum word count. You go through years of this kind of bad practice and training, and, if you're like me, you then spend the rest of your life fighting that bad training. So what is a useless word, you ask? Well, here's an example. You lightly lift the paper from the desk. That's wordy. It could be replaced with, you take the paper. This second version tells you everything you need to know. It's more active, it's more direct, the idea is conveyed to the reader. Too many fluff words slow the game down. The reader of a gamebook is after action and adventure, and is likely to be reading the book multiple times. Fluff will just annoy them, and this leads to the next point. Don't use a passive voice. Most gamebooks are first person, so the protagonist does things, they do things. They're not seen doing things. Make the character active and dynamic. You should represent that in the text. I suggest you Google passive voice for more detail. I can't really cover that amount of information in this video. 1 POV or point of view. It's possible that your story spans centuries and is told by each descendant of a particular clan. Or perhaps there are 5 members of the gang making the heist, and you want the reader to make choices for all 5. Don't. I won't say don't ever do that, but for the love of all that is gamebook, do not change POV in a gamebook, at least not until you've got a few under your belt. It's difficult to pull off, and best left to the practiced. Stay in one person's head or over one person's shoulder. That way you keep the writing simpler and the editing so much easier. Imagine you have a complex structure to your gamebook, and as you switch from branch to branch while you're writing, you change which character you're writing for. You'll make so many more mistakes, and your readers will spot every single one of them, and they'll let you know. 1 POV, and only one, is the way to go. One sentence is not a gamebook entry of interest to anyone. Allow yourself no more than 3 one-sentence entries in a 400-entry gamebook. That's an arbitrary number, but it's a good one. When you're tired and after a day of work or schooling and you come to type up some more entries in your gamebook, it's very easy to become lazy and to write only 1 line and call it done. But you can't allow that to become a habit. When editing, think very, very carefully when you come across a single sentence. What action and mood can you present in a single line? Not a lot. You may even think there is nothing you can add to what you've put down, but there is. Your protagonist can weigh up the options, or have a flashback to a similar situation, or long for a deceased friend who had a useful skill. There is always something you can add to boost the story, to fill out the scene, or to build the characters. If you have a single line entry, consider it a failure and demand of yourself that you rewrite it. This perhaps is one of the more important tips. Read your text aloud, not in your head, but out loud. Believe me when I say that reading it loud will reveal poor writing, that reading it in your head will simply miss. You'll hear characters speaking in ways that sound odd or poorly constructed. You'll find where sentences should end that need a full stop, and so many other weaknesses in your writing. Out loud, even whispered, will make all the difference to the end result. Now here's the trick of it. When you go to read the entry out loud, read the sentences in reverse order. Read out the last sentence first and work your way back to the beginning of the entry. This sounds odd, I know, but the result is that you will read what's written as opposed to reading what you think you wrote. Too often when reading our own work, our brains kick in with all the assumptions about the sentence that we had when we were writing. Reading backwards like this will help break that thought process and help you concentrate on that one line. Check your linkages. When you've made your first editing pass and fixed the typos and culled the pointless words, tightened your text, made it active, then it's time to check the linkages between each entry. Now you go back to the beginning and check that each entry runs smoothly into the next. In this stage, number the entries. These will not be the final numbers in your gamebook. These are for reference only. These will simplify the checking you need to do at this stage. Number each entry on your flowchart and add a matching number to the text of your entry. Work from top to bottom, 1 to 400, or as many entries as you have. Do not do this randomly. Work from top to bottom, because when you're checking these, you don't want to be jumping forwards and backwards 50 pages at a time in the word processor. The closer each entry is to the preceding one, the quicker this process will be. Working through the entries, one at a time, top to bottom, read the preceding entry or entries and ensure that the text flows and makes sense as you move into the entry you're currently checking. Once you've done that, read this entry again and see how that flows into the following entry or entries that you link to. If you have an entry that is reached from 2 other entries and can lead to 2 more, you're going to have to read this entry 4 times. Worse, if you have to edit any one of the entries involved, you have to check all the linkages again on this entry. It's mundane, it's boring, but it needs to be done. So now you've completed your editing pass and checked all the linkages. Well done. But you're not done. Do it all again. You've missed problems. And this is heartbreaking, mind-breaking drudgery, but it has to be done. You cannot trust spell checkers, syntax checkers, or any other tool. The Mark I eyeball is the best tool in your bag. It's slow, and it's hard, and it's boring. But that second editing pass will surprise you. You'll find things and you won't believe how you could have missed them the first time round. This happens to me all the time. If you've not done this before, you'll be saying to yourself that it's silly and a waste of time. I know what I did. Well, I can tell you, I got burned for being lazy. Don't be like me, be better. In the next part of this series, I plan to get into the final numbering of your paragraphs.